2 years after humanity had walked away from the Galactic Council, the organization officially ceased to exist. The final session was attended by only 12 species, and the vote to dissolve was unanimous. There was no ceremony, no grand speeches, no acknowledgement of what the Council had once represented. The remaining delegates simply turned off the lights and left. The great crystal chamber where galactic democracy had once flourished fell silent and dark. Dust began to settle on the empty chairs where hundreds of species had once debated the future of civilization. The building itself became a monument to the failure of cooperation without shared values. In the vacuum left by the Council's collapse, 3 distinct regions emerged across the galaxy. Each represented a different approach to survival in the new reality that humanity's departure had created. The human sphere encompassed Earth and its 137 colony worlds. These systems thrived in peaceful isolation behind borders that were now the most heavily defended in the galaxy. Human civilization had never been stronger, more prosperous, or more united. The Allied systems consisted of 43 species that had individually negotiated treaties with humanity. These worlds enjoyed limited human protection and trade in exchange for resources, territory, and strict adherence to human ethical standards. It was not an equal partnership, but it was survival. Everything else had become the wild space, where the remnants of former council species struggled to survive without the infrastructure and protection they had taken for granted. It was a region of constant warfare, economic collapse, and civilizational decay. Ambassador Clark Williams, now retired to a quiet farm on New Montana, received a steady stream of visitors. Former council members, species leaders, and desperate diplomats all made the journey to his remote ranch, seeking some path back to human protection. His former aide, now working as his secretary, kept him informed of the latest requests. The Rigelian Commerce Union is offering a 90% stake in their dilithium mines for basic medical support, she reported during their weekly briefing. Clark shook his head while feeding his horses. We're not interested in colonial arrangements. If they want human assistance, they can apply for membership in the Allied systems. Same terms as everyone else. The terms were simple but demanding. Complete transparency in government and military affairs. Adherence to human ethical standards regarding individual rights and the value of life. Binding arbitration for all disputes with human arbitrators making final decisions. And acceptance that humanity would always have the final say in matters of mutual defense. Many species found these terms unacceptable. The proud Veltar refused to submit to human ethical oversight, calling it cultural imperialism. The remnants of the Trader Guild balked at transparency requirements that would expose their corrupt business practices. The Granite Lords could not accept binding arbitration because their culture required personal combat to resolve disputes. They chose to take their chances in wild space rather than acknowledge human moral authority. It was a choice that proved fatal for most of them. Without the stabilizing influence of human intervention, ancient rivalries flared into open warfare across wild space. The Veltar and Aquatic Confederation fought a vicious war over water rights that left both species devastated. Their conflict poisoned 3 star systems and left billions dead. The Trader Guild fragmented into competing cartels that spent more energy fighting each other than moving cargo. Their private wars disrupted what little commerce remained in wild space, pushing entire civilizations into poverty and starvation. The Granite Lords maintained their warrior culture until the end, fighting honorable duels even as their worlds burned around them. The last of their kind died in single combat, while Vorthan raiders looted their cities. Admiral Jake Morrison, now in command of all human military forces, watched the chaos from his office on Luna Station. Reports crossed his desk daily chronicling the collapse of civilizations that had once seemed mighty and eternal. Any regrets? Dr. Lisa Parker asked during one of their regular briefings. She had become humanity's chief liaison to the Allied systems, helping new member species adapt to human standards. Jake considered the question carefully while reviewing casualty reports from wild space. About leaving the council? No. About the suffering that followed some, but we tried to work within their system for 15 years. We bled for them, died for them, sacrificed our children for their safety. They repaid us with sanctions every time we saved lives. The Zephyrian survivors are requesting asylum again, Lisa noted. the few thousand who escaped the destruction of their homeworld. Approved, but they go through the standard integration process like everyone else, Jake replied. No special treatment because they used to be powerful. The integration process for new Allied Systems members was thorough and sometimes painful. Species had to prove they could function according to human ethical standards. Their governments were restructured to protect individual rights. Their military forces were integrated under human command. Their economies were rebuilt according to human principles of fair trade and worker protection. It was not easy, but it worked. The Allied systems were peaceful, prosperous, and growing stronger every year. Crime was virtually non-existent. Wars between member species were impossible. Standards of living rose steadily as human technology and knowledge were shared freely with those who had earned the right to receive them. On Earth, President Kennedy was delivering his final State of the Union address before retiring from politics. When we walked away from the Galactic Council, many called us isolationists, he said to the assembled representatives of humanity's worlds. They said we were abandoning our responsibilities to the galaxy. He paused, looking out at faces that showed confidence and prosperity, rather than the worry and exhaustion that had marked human leadership during the council years. But our first responsibility was always to ourselves, to our values, and to our people. Today, human space is peaceful, prosperous, and growing. We have welcomed 17 new species into the Allied systems in the past year alone, each one committed to the principles of cooperation, transparency, and respect for life. The President gestured to a display showing the current state of the galaxy. Green areas marked human and Allied systems territory, which was expanding steadily. Red areas showed the chaos of wild space, which was shrinking as species either joined the Allied systems or simply went extinct. The galaxy learned a hard lesson over the past 2 years. President Kennedy continued. Civilization is not a right but a responsibility. It must be built, maintained, and defended every single day. For too long, other species relied on human sacrifice to maintain their comfort and safety. When that sacrifice was no longer freely given, their civilization crumbled. He looked directly into the cameras that would carry his words to every human world. We remain open to any species willing to embrace our values and contribute to our shared prosperity. But we will never again sacrifice our principles or our people for those who view compassion as weakness and gratitude as optional. In wild space, the last independent Zephyrian fleet received President Kennedy's broadcast while hiding in an asteroid field, hunted by Vorthon warships. Fleet Commander Zix translated the human words for his crew, many of whom had never heard a human speak before. He says they will accept us if we prove we can live by their standards, Zix reported. What standards? Asked his tactical officer. Zix consulted the Allied Systems Charter that had been transmitted with the President's speech. No slavery, no genocide, no wars of conquest, protection for individuals against government oppression, fair treatment for workers, peaceful resolution of disputes. The crew fell silent. These were not the values that Zephyrian civilization had been built on. Their empire had expanded through conquest. Their economy had depended on slave labor. Their government had crushed dissent without mercy. Can we change? The tactical officer asked quietly. We'll have to, Zix replied. It's either change or die. As humanity entered its 3rd year of independence from galactic politics, the lesson was clear to anyone willing to see it. True strength came not from military might or economic power, but from the courage to live by consistent principles even when others refused to recognize their value. The galaxy was smaller now, lonelier perhaps, but it was also more honest. Humanity and its allies had built something better than the Galactic Council had ever been. A community based not on compromise with those who valued power over principle, but on partnership with those who shared their commitment to building something worth protecting. The Galactic Council had collapsed, not because humans destroyed it, but because it had never been strong enough to stand without them. In the end, civilization required more than laws and treaties. It required people willing to sacrifice for what was right, even when sacrifice brought punishment rather than gratitude. Humanity had made that sacrifice for 15 years. When their sacrifice was rejected, they had chosen to walk away. The galaxy was still learning to live with the consequences of that choice. 6 months after humanity had walked away from the Galactic Council, the organization faced its first complete existential crisis. The Trader Guild, once the economic backbone of galactic civilization, announced that it could no longer guarantee safe passage through any major shipping lane. Guildmaster Treek stood before the reduced council assembly, his bark-like skin gray with stress. Piracy has increased by 800% since the human withdrawal, he reported. Insurance costs have become so high that only the wealthiest corporations can afford to ship goods between systems. The numbers were staggering. Trade volume had dropped by 70%. Entire shipping companies had gone bankrupt. Planets that depended on imported food were facing starvation. Industrial worlds could not get the raw materials they needed to keep their factories running. "Where are your security forces?" demanded the Zephyrian ambassador. "Why aren't you protecting your own ships?" Treek's branches rustled with bitter laughter. "Our security forces consisted of hired human mercenaries and council patrol ships. The humans are gone, and your patrol ships take weeks to respond to emergency calls." The military situation was becoming desperate. Admiral Zek of the K9 Coalition had been trying to reorganize the Council's defense forces ever since the humans left. His progress reports made for increasingly grim reading. "Human tactical doctrine formed the backbone of our entire defense strategy," he admitted in his latest briefing. "Without their fast response capabilities and their ability to predict enemy movements, we are fighting blind and arriving late to every battle." The Vorthan Empire had noticed the weakness immediately. Their scout ships were probing deeper into Council territory every day, testing defenses and looking for easy targets. What they found encouraged them to become bolder. The breaking point came when a massive Vorthan invasion fleet appeared in the Zephyrian home system. The same species whose ambassador had pushed hardest, for human sanctions now faced the complete destruction of their homeworld. The Zephyrian military command sent out desperate emergency transmissions to every council member. "This is a priority Alpha emergency. The Vorthan dreadnought fleet is approaching our homeworld. We need immediate military assistance." The Council's response was swift but inadequate. They dispatched every available warship to defend the Zephyrian system. But even their combined fleets were no match for the massive Vorthan armada. The battle was a massacre. Council ships, designed for patrol duty and built with different technologies that did not work well together, were destroyed one by the coordinated Vorthan assault. The Zephyrian defense platforms, impressive as they were, could not stop an invasion force of this size. As Zephyrian cities burned and millions of civilians died, the Council made a decision that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. They sent a formal request for assistance to humanity. The message was addressed to President John Kennedy and delivered through diplomatic channels that had not been used since the human withdrawal. The Galactic Council formally requests immediate military intervention by human forces to repel Vorthan aggression against Council member species. In exchange for this assistance, all sanctions against humanity will be permanently suspended. The human response came within hours. It was brief and came from Admiral Karen Smith rather than any political leader. "The Zephyrian system is outside human territorial boundaries, and therefore not our concern. Human military forces will continue their standard patrol routes within human space." Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding the Border Defense Fleet from his flagship, read the Council's desperate plea with dark amusement. His communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Davis, looked troubled by the reports of Zephyrian civilian casualties. "Sir, our long-range sensors are detecting massive casualties in the Zephyrian system," she reported. "Millions are dead, and the Vorthan fleet is preparing to glass their remaining cities." "Tragic," Jake replied without emotion. "I hope they've learned their lesson about the value of human protection. Shouldn't we at least consider helping them?" Amy asked quietly. "They're civilians, sir, children." Jake turned to look at her with tired eyes. "Lieutenant, how many human children died defending Zephyrian colonies over the past 15 years? How many human families were destroyed protecting people who called us criminals for caring too much?" Amy fell silent. She remembered her brother, killed defending a Zephyrian trading post from pirates. The Zephyrians had not even bothered to attend his funeral. As the Zephyrian homeworld burned, other council members began to panic. If the Vorthans could destroy the mighty Zephyrian Empire with impunity, no council world was safe. The Aquatic Confederation was the first to break. Delegate Nemo Rivers announced that his people were withdrawing from the council entirely and seeking a separate peace with humanity. We cannot remain part of an organization that is unable to provide basic security, he announced. Our people's survival is more important than galactic politics. The Lumerian collective followed suit within days. Their delegate, a being of pure energy, flickered with distress as she spoke. The Council has become a liability rather than an asset. We must seek other arrangements for our protection and prosperity. The economic collapse accelerated as more species abandoned the Council structure. Without members to support it, the organization could not maintain even basic services. The central banking system collapsed when 3 major member species withdrew their reserves. The communication network began failing as nobody paid for maintenance. Trade, already crippled by piracy, ground to a complete halt. The Trader Guild fragmented into competing factions that spent more energy fighting each other than moving cargo. Planets that had prospered through galactic commerce found themselves isolated and starving. On Nexus Prime, the fusion reactors that powered the planet finally failed completely. Chief Engineer Val sent out one last transmission before the communication array went dark. This is Nexus Prime Control. Primary power has been lost. Evacuation ships are requested immediately. This is our final transmission. Nobody came to help. The Council no longer had evacuation ships to spare. The medical crisis reached catastrophic proportions when the plague that had been contained on Harmony Station spread to 16 other worlds. Without human medical expertise, the disease spread unchecked through populations that had no natural resistance. Dr. Zara Kim, working without proper equipment or supplies, watched helplessly as patients died from conditions that any human doctor could have treated easily. "We're losing the war against disease," she transmitted to anyone who would listen. "We need human medical assistance immediately." But human medical teams were busy taking care of human patients in human hospitals in human space. They were not available for alien emergencies. Council session attendance continued to decline as the organization struggled to maintain relevance. What had once been gatherings of over 100 species dwindled to barely 30 representatives. The great chamber where galactic democracy had once flourished now echoed mostly empty. The Veltar delegate made one last, desperate proposal. "We must formally apologize to humanity and beg them to return," she hissed. "Our pride is worth nothing if our species face extinction." The Zephyrian ambassador, speaking for what remained of his devastated people, could only agree. "The humans were right to leave," he admitted bitterly. "We punished them for showing the compassion we lacked ourselves." But even this admission came too late. In human space, President Kennedy was addressing a joint session of Earth's Global Assembly. "The galaxy has had 6 months to demonstrate that it can function without human assistance," he said. "The results speak for themselves." He gestured to a display showing the chaos spreading across former Council territory. "Civilizations are collapsing, species are going extinct, and entire worlds are falling into darkness. This is what happens when order is maintained not by law, but by the sacrifice of those who choose to do what is right." The president paused, looking out at the assembled human representatives. "Some may call us heartless for refusing to intervene, but we gave the galaxy 15 years of our blood, our treasure, and our lives. In return, we received sanctions and condemnation. We will not make that mistake again." In the ruins of what had once been galactic civilization, the lesson was becoming clear. The Galactic Council had never been as strong as it appeared. It had been held together not by law or treaty, but by human willingness to sacrifice for the common good. When that sacrifice was withdrawn, everything fell apart. The first disaster happened exactly 6 weeks after the last human ship had left alien space. The Corvani system, still weak from the plague that humans had helped cure, found itself under attack by a fleet of Vorthan raiders. The automated distress beacon sent its emergency signal into space, calling for help according to standard Council protocols. In the old days, when humans maintained the frontier defense grid, that signal would have reached a human patrol ship within 18 hours. The nearest human base would have dispatched a rescue fleet immediately, but there were no more human patrol ships. The signal traveled through empty space until it finally reached a Council monitoring station 8 days later. By the time the Council's emergency response team could organize a rescue mission, it was far too late. When the Council fleet finally arrived at Corvani Prime, they found 3 of the planet's 5 colonies completely destroyed. 2 million Corvani civilians were dead. The survivors huddled in underground shelters, their cities burning above them. Elder Vrak, the same Corvani leader who had begged Dr. Jennifer Mills to stay, met the council rescue team with hollow eyes. "Where were you?" he asked simply. The council military commander, a proud creature from the Canine Coalition, had no answer. In the council's emergency session hall, representatives from dozens of species gathered to discuss the growing crisis. The hall felt different now, larger somehow, with too much empty space where human representatives used to sit. The humans had an average response time of 18 hours to any distress call in the Outer Rim, reported Delegate Nemo Rivers, speaking for the Aquatic Confederation. His gills fluttered nervously as he spoke. "Our nearest fleet required 8 days just to receive the distress signal. Perhaps we should reconsider the sanctions against humanity," suggested a nervous representative from the Trader Guild. His species looked like walking trees, and his bark was turning pale with worry. The Zephyrian ambassador's tentacles writhed angrily. "Absolutely not. We cannot appear weak by crawling back to the humans the moment we face a small difficulty." But the difficulties were far from small. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy. 6 agricultural worlds were experiencing massive crop failures because their atmospheric processors had stopped working. The machines were incredibly complex, designed by human engineers using principles that other species had never bothered to learn. On the farming world of New Kansas, the acid storms had returned with a vengeance. Without the atmospheric processors to neutralize them, the storms were destroying crops and poisoning water supplies. The insect-like colonists who had depended on human farming technology found their eggs dying in the toxic environment. 3 major trade routes had become hunting grounds for pirates and raiders. Without human patrol ships to maintain security, criminals had quickly learned that they could attack merchant vessels without fear of quick retaliation. Insurance costs for shipping had increased by over 300% in just 2 months. The Trader Guild was losing money faster than they could count it. Ships were being hijacked, crews were being killed or enslaved, and cargo was disappearing into black markets across the galaxy. The careful network of commerce that had kept dozens of species prosperous was falling apart. On the industrial world of Nexus Prime, Chief Engineer Val filed a report that made grim reading. "The fusion reactors are operating at only 60% efficiency," she wrote. "Without human maintenance protocols, we estimate complete system failure within 4 months. When that happens, this world will lose all electrical power." The problem was not just mechanical. The humans had not simply operated alien machines. They had understood them in ways that other species had never learned. Human engineers thought differently, approached problems differently, and saw solutions that escaped other minds. "We have the technical manuals that the humans left behind," Val reported to the council, "but they are written in human scientific language. We lack the fundamental education to understand what they mean." The medical crisis was even worse. Dr. Zara Kim, a Lumerian physician, sent reports that kept council members awake at night. "Without human medical support, mortality rates across 17 systems have increased by 340%, she wrote. "We have human medical equipment, but we don't understand how to use it properly." The problem went deeper than just operating machines. Human doctors had spent decades studying the biological differences between species. They had developed treatment methods that worked across dozens of different alien biologies. Other species had been content to let humans handle the complicated cases. Now, those other species were watching their people die from diseases that humans could have cured easily. On the peaceful world of Harmony Station, a plague similar to the one that had struck the Corvani was spreading through the population. The local medical team sent desperate messages to anyone who would listen. "We need the human vaccine formulas," they transmitted to the council. "Our people are dying, and we don't know how to help them." But the vaccine formulas were stored in human databases, in human space, protected by human security systems. And the humans were not answering any calls from council species. Meanwhile, in the safety of human territory, life continued peacefully. Earth's colonies were thriving. Without the constant demand to provide aid to alien worlds, humans could focus their resources on improving their own societies. President John Kennedy toured a new medical research facility on Mars. "We've redirected the resources we once spent protecting others toward improving our own worlds, he told reporters. Education funding is up 40%. Crime rates are at historic lows. Our people are healthier and happier than they've been in decades. The human military was also benefiting from the change. Instead of spreading their forces thin across the galaxy, protecting alien worlds from various threats, they could concentrate on defending human space. Their defenses were stronger than ever. Admiral Karen Smith reviewed reports from her border patrol fleets. No incidents to report, she told her staff. Our territory remains secure and peaceful. What about the distress calls we're receiving from Council space? Asked Captain Ben Stone. Outside our territory, Admiral Smith replied firmly. Not our concern. The distress calls were increasing every day. Former Council allies were begging for human assistance. Some offered money, others offered territory, and a few offered complete submission to human authority. All of them were ignored. Back in Council space, the situation continued to deteriorate. The Vorthan Empire, sensing weakness, had begun probing attacks against multiple systems. Without the human early warning network, these attacks came as complete surprises. The Veltar lost an entire colony world before they even knew they were under attack. The Granite Lords saw their mining operations destroyed by pirates who had once been too afraid of human retaliation to venture into their territory. Even the proud Zephyrians were beginning to show signs of strain. Their advanced technology meant little when they couldn't coordinate responses to threats or maintain their infrastructure without human expertise. Council attendance, which had once boasted representatives from 127 species, began to decline. Some species were too busy dealing with emergencies to send delegates. Others were quietly reconsidering their membership in an organization that seemed incapable of providing the security and prosperity it had once promised. The great experiment in galactic cooperation was beginning to crumble, and it had taken less than 3 months for the cracks to show. 3 months after Captain Jake Morrison had walked out of the Council chambers, human ships began disappearing from alien ports across the galaxy. At first, nobody noticed. A human cargo ship here, a medical team there, a patrol vessel that simply did not show up for its scheduled route. The changes happened slowly, like water draining from a bathtub with a small hole. Commander Steve Rogers stood on the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the largest movement of people and equipment in human history. Giant cargo ships floated past the windows, their holds full of machines, supplies, and technology that humans had built over decades of working with alien species. Are we really doing this? Sam? Steve asked his second officer, Lieutenant Sam Tucker. Sam looked tired. He had been working 20-hour days for weeks, organizing the evacuation of human personnel from hundreds of worlds. The Council made their choice, Sam said. They want to treat us like criminals for having hearts, fine. Let them see how they do without us. On the farming world of New Kansas, Bill Henderson supervised the removal of the atmospheric processors that his family had operated for 2 generations. The machines were as big as city blocks and had taken years to install. They controlled the weather, cleaned the air, and made it possible for both humans and aliens to live on the planet. Crix, an insect-like alien whose hive had grown rich from human farming technology, watched nervously as human workers disconnected the processors piece by piece. But who will keep the weather machines working? Crix asked. Its compound eyes reflected worry. The storms will come back without the processors. Bill did not look up from his work tablet. Not our problem anymore. Talk to the Council about it. The alien's mandibles clicked in distress. But my eggs, my young ones, they cannot survive the acid storms. Should have thought about that before you voted to punish us, Bill replied. Dr. Lisa Parker stood in the main medical center on Nexus Prime, watching her staff pack up equipment that had saved thousands of alien lives, the mobile surgery units, the gene therapy machines, the disease research computers. All of it was going back to human space. The Zephyrians are begging us to stay, reported Dr. Paul Newman over the communication system. He was overseeing evacuations in the Outer Rim territories. They say the Council went too far with the sanctions. Too late, Lisa said as she sealed another crate of medical supplies. We're not leaving anyone behind. Complete withdrawal, no exceptions. The hardest part was abandoning the frontier defense grid. For 8 years, human fleets had maintained a network of early warning stations and patrol routes that protected 43 different species from pirates, raiders, and the constantly threatening Vorthan Empire. Admiral Karen Smith received the final withdrawal order while standing on the bridge of the USS Defiance. Her fleet had just finished driving off a group of Vorthan scouts who had been testing the defenses around a peaceful trading world. "Ma'am, we're getting emergency calls from Council representatives," Captain Ben Stone reported. "They're asking when we plan to hand over the defense stations to Council forces." Karen almost laughed. "Tell them we're not handing over anything. All stations will be abandoned in 72 hours. Leave nothing working behind." "But Admiral," Ben said quietly, "without the early warning system, the Vorthans could attack anywhere without being detected." "That's the Council's problem now," Karen replied. "We tried to work with them. They decided our help wasn't wanted." The evacuation of Defense Station 7 took place under the watchful eyes of a Vorthan spy ship that had been lurking just outside sensor range for days. As the last human transport departed, the spy ship moved closer to examine what the humans had left behind. The station was completely empty. Every computer had been wiped clean. Every weapon had been removed. Even the life support systems had been shut down. The Vorthans would find nothing but empty rooms and dead circuits. On Earth, President John Kennedy addressed the Global Assembly as reports of the evacuation came in from across the galaxy. "For too long we have spent our resources, our technology, and our lives protecting species that see our compassion as weakness," he said. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for humanity. We will focus on our own growth, our own prosperity, and our own security." The president looked out at the assembled representatives from Earth's colonies. "We estimate that within 6 months, every human citizen and every piece of human technology will be safely within our own territorial boundaries. For the first time in generations, humanity will be responsible only for humanity." On the industrial world of Nexus Prime, Chief Engineer Val watched human technicians systematically disable the factories and power plants that had kept the planet running. The aliens who worked in these facilities stood around helplessly as machines they did not understand were shut down forever. "But how will we repair the fusion reactors?" asked Zara Kim, a Lumerian engineer. "We don't know how your technology works." The human chief engineer looked at her with tired eyes. "You should have learned while we were here to teach you. We offered training programs for decades. Your people said they were too busy with more important things. Please," Zara begged, "at least leave us the instruction manuals." "The manuals are written in human languages and use human mathematics," the engineer replied. "Without understanding our basic scientific principles, they would be useless to you anyway." As the last human ships prepared to leave Nexus Prime, emergency alarms began sounding across the planet. Without human maintenance, the primary fusion reactor was starting to overheat. The automated safety systems that humans had installed began shutting down non-essential systems to prevent a catastrophic explosion. The aliens on the planet sent desperate messages to the departing human fleet begging for help. But the human ships continued their jump to hyperspace without responding. On the medical station orbiting Corvani Prime, the world that humans had recently saved from plague, Dr. Jennifer Mills supervised the removal of the last medical equipment. Corvani officials had come to plead with her personally. "Dr. Mills, please reconsider," said Elder Vrack, the leader of the Corvani government. "Our people still need medical support. The plague may return." "Then I suggest you contact the council and ask them to send medical teams," Jennifer replied as she loaded vaccine samples into a secure container. "Oh wait, that's right. The council doesn't have any medical teams that can treat your specific biology. Only humans develop that expertise. But without your vaccines, millions could die. That's what we tried to tell the council," Jennifer said. "They decided our medical intervention was illegal interference. So we're stopping our interference." The Corvani elder's face showed deep distress. "This is punishment for something we had no control over. We didn't vote for the sanctions." "You're members of the council," Jennifer replied. "You could have opposed the sanctions. You could have left the council in protest. You chose not to." As human ships jumped to hyperspace from system after system, they left behind empty buildings, silent machines, and increasingly worried alien populations. The species that had grown dependent on human technology, human protection, and human knowledge were beginning to realize what they had lost. But it was too late. Humanity was going home. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the huge room where aliens from across the galaxy met to make decisions. The walls were made of crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Hundreds of different creatures sat in floating chairs or stood on platforms designed for their strange bodies. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking trees, and many had shapes that human eyes found hard to understand. Jake had been coming to these meetings for 10 years. He had watched his friends die protecting worlds that belonged to these same aliens. He had seen human doctors work day and night to save alien children from diseases. He had commanded ships that fought in wars to protect creatures who now looked at him with cold eyes. Today felt different. Today the anger in Jake's chest burned hotter than ever before. The Zephyrian ambassador floated in front of the main speaking area. Its body looked like a jellyfish made of silver metal. Long tentacles moved through the air as it spoke. A machine translated its words into sounds that humans could understand. "The humans have broken our laws again," the ambassador said. Its voice came out flat and emotionless from the translator. "They helped the Corvani people when they were sick. This goes against our most important rule about not interfering with other worlds." Dr. Lisa Parker stepped forward. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She had spent the last 20 years saving lives across the galaxy. Her hands shook slightly as she spoke. "We saved 3 million people," Lisa said. "The Corvani were dying from a sickness that we could cure easily. We have medicine that could help them in just a few days." "That does not matter," hissed a creature that looked like a giant snake with arms. This was the Veltar delegate. Its yellow eyes glowed with anger. "The law says we cannot interfere. It does not matter if people die. The law is more important than life." Ambassador Clark Williams felt sick to his stomach. He had been Earth's main representative to the Council for 15 years. He had tried so hard to make these aliens understand that humans cared about doing the right thing. But every time humans helped someone, the Council punished them. "The Council has decided to punish the humans," announced a being made of pure light. This was the Lumerian speaker. "Human ships cannot use trade routes in sectors 7 through 15. Human ships cannot dock at neutral space stations for the next 4 cycles." Jake Morrison's hands made fists at his sides. 4 cycles meant almost 2 years in human time. This punishment would hurt millions of human traders and their families. All because humans had chosen to save lives instead of following stupid rules. He thought about his crew on the ship waiting outside. Good people who had risked everything to protect aliens who clearly did not care about them. He thought about Lieutenant Amy Davis, who had lost her brother fighting Vorthan raiders last year. The Vorthans had been attacking a world full of peaceful farmers. The Council had asked humans to help, and Amy's brother had died stopping them. He thought about Captain Ben Stone, who had given up his own medical supplies to help sick alien children. Ben's own daughter had to wait longer for treatment because her father chose to help strangers first. He thought about all the human soldiers floating in space, dead because they had answered calls for help from species who now wanted to punish humanity for caring too much. The alien voices grew louder. More species stood up to speak against humanity. The insect-like klaxons clicked angrily about human interference. The rock-like granite lords rumbled about humans being too emotional. The plant-like Verdians rustled their leaves in disgust at human compassion. "Humans are too dangerous," one alien said. "They do not follow rules. Humans think they know. Better than everyone else," said another. "Humans cannot be trusted." "To obey the law," said a third. Jake listened to. Creature after creature condemn his species for the crime of caring about life. These same creatures had begged for human help when they were in danger. They had cried for human doctors when their people were sick. They had called for human soldiers when enemies attacked their worlds. But now that the immediate danger was over, now that their people were safe and healthy, they wanted to punish the humans who had saved them. The council chamber fell quiet. All eyes turned to Jake Morrison. As the senior military representative, tradition said he should speak for humanity's military forces. Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces. Some looked angry, some looked satisfied, and some looked worried. But none of them looked grateful. None of them remembered that human blood had bought their safety. "You know what?" Jake said. His voice was quiet, but it carried clearly through the huge room. "We're done." The chamber became completely silent. Even the constant humming and clicking sounds that aliens made when they breathed stopped. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" the Zephyrian ambassador said. Its tentacles had stopped moving. "We're done," Jake repeated louder this time. "Humanity is finished with this council. We're finished with your rules. We're finished with dying for people who hate us for trying to help. Clark Williams stared at Jake in shock. This was not part of any plan they had discussed. But as he looked at the young captain's face, Clark realized that Jake was saying what every human in the room was thinking. "You cannot simply leave," the Lumerian speaker said. Light flickered nervously around its form. "There are procedures. There are treaties. Watch us," Jake said. He turned to Lisa Parker and Clark Williams. "Pack up your things. We're going home." As the three humans walked toward the exit, alien voices erupted behind them. Some were angry, some were confused, and some were starting to sound worried. But Jake Morrison did not look back. He was done looking back. Outside the council building, human ships waited in the darkness of space. Soon those ships would carry humanity away from this place forever. Soon the galaxy would learn what it meant to face the darkness without human light to guide the way.